There still is not a coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, but this means at this moment, for now, we've got to talk about Kyle Dubas.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Monday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's account a follow at LO_Penguins. And as always, we appreciate you making this show part of your daily routine because we're your team every day. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And if you follow us on YouTube, go ahead and hit the notification button. That way you can be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Hunter, welcome back to the show. You have clearly made it to your destination, and show us, if you're for the people watching on YouTube, where you are.
Can you see it? I think you can see it. Yeah, I think everyone can see it. Yeah. I'm oceanfront, South Carolina, right outside of Myrtle Beach, kind of. I was trying to do a car cast on Friday. Didn't work out. Wi-Fi was really spotty. But yeah, I made it to my destination. I'm going to be here for every episode this week because it could be a pretty big week here for the Penguins. We were hoping to potentially go live this weekend if Kyle Dubas wanted to hire a head coach, but they decided not to do it. And there's been a lot of rumors that it could come today. Honestly, Pat, there's been a lot of conflicting reports today. You have Elliot Friedman saying that Penguins are kind of taking their time. Then you have Chris Johnson and David Pagnotta saying, oh, hire could be announced as early as today. In summary, I don't think anyone really knows what's going on here.
Right. And with that in mind, today's episode could be rendered a little bit moot by the time we get to even later today, because they could announce a hire depending upon what happens. But
if they do, we will go live for like 10 to 15 minutes talking about the hire, and then we'll have a full episode tomorrow.
Absolutely. But let's start here. We've got to talk about Kyle Dubas in the Pittsburgh Penguins and what this means, because this is arguably the biggest moment to date of Kyle Dubas's tenure as the president of hockey operations for the Penguins, because this is a very, very consequential hire. Not that we're breaking any new ground in saying that, but let's talk about the context that you just laid out. Obviously, about a week or so ago during the World Championships, he tells Josh Yeo he has a self-imposed deadline of June 1st to have a coach in place. Well, it's June 2nd. There still is not a coach. There are conflicting reports that it could come later today. That you also brought up Elliot Friedman saying they're taking their time. And normally, I would be okay with saying they're taking their time making this hire, because for the last 20 or so years, we know where this organization has been. They have been in win now mode. And that comes with knowing that you have the majority of your roster set. You've got to make some tinkering around the edges. You got to fill out the depth, but you get what the mission is. So you want to find the correct coach to lead you to the promised land. This is different. Right now, we're looking for a coach who has to walk an incredible tightrope. He has to both make sure that the core four are still very happy. They have, or 3, 4, depending on what happens with Carlson. But you have to make sure those veterans are happy and still willing to play and give you their all for when this team hopefully turns a corner in a couple of years, but also develop the young players that are going to come into the system and that are already here. So there are conflicting reports right now that we've heard it's Mitch Love's job if he wants it. We've also been told not to roll out DJ Smith, which both of us are on record as not being huge fans. So this is a massive moment for Kyle Dubas. And not only does he have to get it right, he's probably got to get it right pretty quickly.
I agree with that. And based on all the reports out there, it feels like it's kind of a 2-horse race between those two. I also wouldn't be surprised if the Penguins are kind of waiting for the Bruins to make their decision here. The Bruins, I think they're going to be making their decision maybe today, tomorrow, Wednesday. I think they've wrapped up their final interviews as well. Mitch Love is also a finalist there. He could be one of the final two candidates, though I still think Marco Sturm is probably going to be the hire there. If that's the case, then hey, maybe the Penguins say to Mitch Love, okay, this is your job now. But if the Bruins hire Mitch Love, for example, maybe the Penguins are like, okay, now we have to go hire DJ Smith and all that. And I know I wasn't there for the episode on Friday where, you discussed DJ Smith a little bit, but I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine last week about Smith and his time in Ottawa. And I know what his pitch probably was to Dubas. And it was like, hey, you see how successful the Senators are now? Well, I kind of kickstarted that, and I did help develop some of these young players, like a Tim Stützle, like not a Matthew Tkachuk, obviously, like a Brady Tkachuk, Jake Sanderson, etc. But the conversation my buddy and I were having, it was like, did you help develop them, or did you just play them top 6 minutes and they kind of learned on their own? I kind of feel like it's the latter a little bit more than the former, but that's also just my opinion on that. So I think his development with those young players, it's a little bit overblown, which is why I would just rather go with someone who I think did a great job, especially this year in Washington, did a great job for Calgary's AHL farm system in Mitch Love. Now, are you going to see a crash out from Pat and I if they hire DJ Smith? No, we're going to give our objective thoughts about him. We're going to see how his tenure goes as a whole, but we just think there's a couple better candidates right now than DJ Smith. Will be the end of the world if they hire him? No, but it'll tell us that he's also probably only going to be the head coach for 2 to 3 seasons, if that, honestly. But that said, he's still not close to my first choice because I don't think he did that good of a job in Ottawa. But hey, we'll see where this goes. It's still, nothing is official yet. Until it happens, we can just only give our takes and kind of speculate a little bit. But that's kind of my overall thoughts on DJ Smith a little bit more as a candidate. But it also kind of says to me that, Dubas is kind of hiring one of his buddies a little bit. They have a history together, Pat. They work together in Toronto. I don't want you just hiring one of your buddies for the sake of hiring your buddies. I just want you to hire the best candidate. That's all.
That's where I am. And I've said it on the show. I'm not going to completely rehash it. I think that there is a lane where you can understand that Ottawa was not a great organization during DJ Smith's time. And maybe that worked against him. We'll never truly know. But I agree with that overall point is you're in a position now where you need to just hire the best candidate. Obviously, one thing, a caveat I want to add here is it's the same conversation that we have with free agents. They have to want to come here. And let's be completely frank on this. Pittsburgh's not a destination right now because they're backsliding from 20 years of contention and being one of the best franchises in the league to where they're kind of in the wilderness right now. You still have a couple all-time greats on the roster, but clearly their careers are coming to an end. You've improved your farm system, but in no world is it a great farm system yet. So this is a difficult hire. Obviously, Kyle Dubas is making the big bucks, so no excuses on that. You're paid to make this work. But to kind of wrap up this portion of the first segment, he has to get it right because it is a very crucial hire, and it's going to be a pretty big linchpin for where he wants to take this franchise. And if you don't get the right coach who can do what you want him to do for this organization, it's going to set this plan back pretty far. But real quick before we end this segment,
I was just also going to say this too. For Mitch Love or DJ Smith, it comes down to really 2 things for me. I think Mitch Love will, A, do a better job developing some of these younger players, especially McGroarty and Koivunen. And B, I think he'll also make them a bit tougher to play against, especially in their own zone. I think he will get them to be a little bit better of a defensive team. Now, I'm not expecting them to play like the Florida Panthers in their own zone or even as stingy as the LA Kings, for example, but I do think he will install a bit more defensive awareness in some of the Penguins games. So that's what it comes down to for me when you look at those 2 candidates, and that's why I would prefer someone like a Mitch Love over a DJ Smith. But continue.
That's right where I am. So real quick before we head to break, there was a coaching hire in the organization, just not the head coach of the top club. The Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins announced that Brad Malone has been hired as an assistant coach. And this is kind of part of where this organization is right now. You're going for younger players. He is all of 36 years old, and his coaching experience is simply he was originally the player development coach for the Oshawa Generals, then takes over as interim head coach. Team goes on one hell of a run under Malone, going 23-11-4 in the regular season, and then 13-8 in the playoffs, heading to the OHL finals as the Eastern Conference champions. He was mostly an AHL guy throughout his career. He was drafted in the 4th round, 105th overall in the 2007 draft by the Avs. He had 32 points in the NHL, but he also played several seasons in the A for the Lake Erie Monsters, Hershey Bears, Chicago Wolves, and Bakersfield Condors. Pretty good AHL career, 105 goals, 291 points. So solid little hire to get on the bench. Guy who has a lot of experience in the AHL, can be almost the good cop for an AHL bench, relatable to the guys who are there, kind of showing them the ropes and helping them develop to the next level.
Right, 100%. He's someone that some of the young players can go to for, whatever troubles them. And heck, he just retired in the spring, man. That's also what's crazy to think about. He had just retired in the spring. He takes over as the interim coach, and Oshawa went on one heck of a run. So this is a really nice hire for Wilkes-Barre. Nice to see them really building up their coaching staff a little bit. Speaking of Wilkes-Barre, Pat, they might be getting a player at some point in the next couple of years after he inked his ELC over the weekend. Probably not going to be this year, though.
That's right. A promising young forward has officially signed his ELC with the Pittsburgh Penguins. We will talk about that player when we come back right after this. But first, we got to tell you about today's first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. The NBA playoffs, they are in full swing, and every night gives you highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and during the game with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to bet smart and win big. You can pick things from like which players are going to show up in the biggest moments, combine live prop bets based on how the action unfolds, and you can win a $200 bonus if your first $5 bet wins. Speaking of, if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place that first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, alongside that beach bum Hunter Hodes. He joins us live from the beach, as he will all week. So get used to that background for the next few days, because that's where Hunter will be. But let's get into a big signing over the weekend. The Penguins announced that they have signed forward Mikhail Ilyin to a 3-year entry-level contract, and he was a Penguins draft pick in the 5th round in 2023. But this looks like another draft steal for the Penguins, a 5th round pick. He's 19 years old. He had 30 points this past season in the AHL. And that is a solid thing I want to focus on, because he is just one of 8 players in the history of the KHL to score 30 plus points in a single campaign. And he set the team record for points by a 19-year-old with a guy who carved out a pretty nice NHL career, guy named Pavel Buchnevich. So obviously not a one-to-one, doesn't mean that he's going to come into the NHL and be that guy, but this looks like a player that could be pretty valuable for the Penguins moving forward.
Right, and we should clarify that he is on a loan for the KHL this next season, Pat. So he will be playing still in the K, and then he's probably going to be coming over to North America. It was weird at first because it sounded like he was going to be coming over this year, kind of like Sergei Murashov just did with the Penguins when he signed his ELC. But then it came out a little bit after that he will be on loan. He'll spend this next season in the K, and then he'll come over to North America. Probably we'll start with Wilkes-Barre, and that's going to be a lot of fun seeing him play in Wilkes-Barre eventually. get to see him on North American ice, and play with some of these other young and promising players in the Penguin system. He has a lot of skill. His playmaking ability is especially great. I know the tape isn't as big as some of the other prospects just because the KHL, it's a little bit limited. But in the limited tape that I have watched of him, again, his playmaking ability is tremendous. It feels like he has 5 eyes, like 2 here, 2 in the back of his head, and maybe 1 to the side or something like that. Like the way that he plays with a puck on his stick, the way that he distributes it is fantastic. Very smart player. I think those are the 2 biggest parts that I like about his game, his hockey IQ and his playmaking ability. His year this year, 7 goals, 30 points in 64 games. Last year, he had 12 goals, 29 points in 65 games. He's been developing really well these last couple of years, and it really feels like the Penguins may have found something here. If he keeps it up, I think he can definitely be a middle 6 player in the league. I don't think he's going to be a star or anything like that. If you look at some of those analytics charts, Pat, like his star comp is someone like a Marty Necas. He can turn into that. I mean, we'll gladly take that on the Penguins. Well, obviously, that's best case scenario, but he's been developing really nicely. And I think more people in the fan base need to see just how good he is, because I think the Penguins really knocked it out of the park with that pick. And I'm going to be really following his year this year closely. Also, did just want to say for Brad Malone, he retired last spring. Obviously, it wasn't this spring. That would have been way too fast of a turnaround. He retired last spring and then got into coaching, and now he's already an assistant at Wilkes-Barre. Pretty awesome in just 1 year since retiring as a player.
Yeah, and back to Ilyin, one thing to keep in mind, the caveat I always add when we talk about KHL players, you brought up those stats, and you can't look at them with an NHL lens because the KHL is a much different league. Scoring is not as high. So being able to do that as a 19 into 20-year-old in the KHL, because this isn't like, say, Sweden or something where you have, well, they do have multiple leagues, but he's in the top league and he's playing with grown men. He's playing with former NHL players, even some former NHL legends who go over there after their NHL run ends. So being able to do that at that age is very impressive. Now the next step is obviously being able to build upon that next season, because as you said, on loan, he's going to remain in the KHL next season. So you have to keep an eye on what he's able to do. The biggest thing for me looking at a player like this is that he's blending something that we're seeing a lot in the modern era with that skill and that hockey sense, but also the size. Not a small guy. 6'3", 191 pounds. He's a solid skater, obviously, like most 19 and 20-year-olds. Got to work on it a little bit. But as I often say with the KHL, bigger ice, bigger surface. So he's got to find a way to be able to make that translate into the NHL. But overall, I think this is a very promising prospect, but I want to see what happens when he comes over in 2 years, because I don't think this is a player that when he comes over, unless he has the training camp to end all training camps, will probably start with the baby Penguins.
100%. I think he's going to start with Wilkes-Barre whenever he's ready to come over here. Yeah, probably going to be after this season. I still want him to work on his release a little bit more, and his skating could obviously be a little bit improved as well. But again, the playmaking and the hockey IQ very much present when you watch his tape. And I think his two-way game has also really developed these last couple of years ever since he was drafted. So again, I really, really like this pick from the Penguins, and I've really liked his development over the last couple of years. Really good news here over the weekend. I know he's not coming over right away like Marashov did, but the fact that we probably know it's coming within a year, that's big news.
Yeah, and I will add this one last caveat before we move on. In our final segment today, we're going to continue our season in review series. We're going to talk about Danton Heinen, a solid depth forward. But one thing about this player is I do think he is a little on a fast track. I think there is a world where he will start in the AHL more than likely when he eventually makes the jump. But he strikes me as a player where if he develops on the track that he's on, you won't see him there very long. It's not going to be like Rutger McGroarty where he's got to spend a large portion of the year in the AHL refining. He feels like a player who the raw skill and the talent and the hockey IQ is there to, hey, get a feel for North American pro hockey, get a feel of how it works. And once you show us you can put together a solid, let's say, month or two, you're probably coming up to the NHL. But that is going to do it for our middle segment. When we come back, as I said, we continue our season in review series, this time talking about depth forward Danton Heinen. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, right alongside Hunter Hodes, and it's time to continue our season in review series for the Pittsburgh Penguins. This time, we're taking a look at a depth forward, and that is Danton Heinen. Reacquired by the Penguins in the Marcus Pettersson-Drew O'Connor trade, ends up playing 28 games for the Penguins, 3 goals, 8 assists for 11 points, and a +3 overall this season. 79 games played, 9 goals, 29 points in total between the Penguins and the Canucks. And this is a pretty simple one for me, Hunter. He's a depth forward in the sense that there are times where you think, great, this is a good depth guy, can play in your bottom 6, can give you some solid production, but at the same time, always leaves you wanting more. You think, man, is a breakout coming? Can he be a fill-in in the top 6? Can he turn into a top 6 forward? But at age 29, it kind of feels like Heinen is who he is.
The thing with Heinen is he's going to go through a lot of stretches where you don't really notice him that much. He's not doing much on the ice. And then he'll whip off like a nice little 6 to 8 game sample size, Pat, where he just scores. Everything he shoots goes in the back of the net. And it feels like you can say the same thing about a lot of other depth forwards in the league, just because a lot of these guys are streaky, man. They'll go on these little runs of scoring, and then they'll disappear for about 10 to 15 to 20 games. And then they'll have another little run here of scoring, and then they'll disappear for 10 to 15 to 20 games. That's kind of what you saw here for Heinen. And yes, the sample size was a bit small. After the end of that trade, he only played in 28 games for the Penguins, a little over 320 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. When he was on the ice, the Penguins had about 52% of the shot attempts, +2 goal differential, 48% expected goal share, though 53% of the scoring chances at 5-on-5. So some of his numbers were good. Some of the others weren't as good. But if they can get, double-digit goals out of him next season before the deadline and then flip him to a contender, I think that's as good as you can do. They also may look to move him during the summer. We'll have to see on that. But if they don't, you can keep him for this season. He can play a top 9 role for you if you want. You can put him on the 3rd line. Heck, you can put him on the 4th line if you want. He scores double-digit goals. He's a little bit of that streaky player. You can get a draft pick for him at the deadline. Totally good with me. He has a year left on his contract. He's not making that much money. That's kind of what we're looking for from Heinen for next season, honestly.
Yeah, you look at his contract, it's $2.25 million for just this upcoming season. And considering where the salary cap is going, what Heinen's history is as an NHL forward, that's a guy that you can move for a mid-round pick. It's a guy that you can maybe get if he goes off, you can maybe get a little bit more. But at the end of the day, you don't see this as a player who is part of really any of your long-term plans. He very much is. I don't even know if we can say that he's a Mark Donk or a Buzz Flibbit, because he hasn't really turned into a top 6 forward. But for a lot of teams, especially teams battling to get into the playoffs, teams maybe battling to jump into that upper echelon of potentially being a contender, he's not a bad depth forward to have at your disposal, because he can get you anywhere between 10 to 15 goals in a good year, maybe a little bit more. He's not a guy. I think this is really maybe the best way to describe him. He's not a liability. You're never going to have Danton Heinen on your roster and think, oh God, they got to shelter Danton Heinen. You got to try to hide him. You got to try to keep him away from certain matchups. He's a solid middle 6 to bottom 6 forward. And that's exactly what he's been ever since he's been in the league and since he's been a Penguin.
Yeah, you can trust him in all three zones. You can play him on the penalty kill. You can put him on your second power play unit. He's just kind of a utility guy at best, honestly. And again, if you can get an okay draft pick for him, if he has double-digit goals at the deadline, I will take that. If someone gets hurt in the top six, he can fill in for 5 to 6 to 7 games, maybe a little bit more. But at best, he's probably on your third or fourth line going into next season. I was fine with him down the stretch. I don't think he lit the league on fire. He obviously did not. I also don't think he was overly terrible. He just kind of is what he is. He's just fine at this point. He's a little bit streaky, but that's what you get from him as a depth forward. So if he's in the middle six to bottom six next year, not the worst thing in the world. And also people, we know they're not trying to be competitive next year. They're not going to be very good. So he was fine. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. And the last thing that I'll add is that he's a player with, considering the contract, like I said, $2.25 million, there's no risk involved. It's not eating up a significant chunk of your salary cap. If he stays right within his career averages of right around 10, maybe 15 goals, it's not the worst thing to have in your lineup as a depth forward. There's always a possibility, even though I'd say it's more unlikely than likely at this point, that he might go off and have a big year. But realistically, there is no issue having him on your roster. Affordable contract, solid depth. And if he performs, say, like a guy like Anthony Beauvillier this year, who knows what kind of contender could come knocking and ask for his services. So at the end of the day, no problem with Danton Heinen. I've never had a problem with Heinen as a Penguin, and hopefully you can get something for him at the deadline or in the lead up to the deadline. And if you don't, you don't really lose anything per se if he walks into free agency. But Hunter, unless you've got anything to add, I think that is going to do it for the Monday edition of Locked On Penguins. Obviously, I will keep a close eye on what happens with the coaching situation and allow Hunter to enjoy his time at the beach. But if they hire a coach, I will wrangle him off the beach to come do an emergency episode to talk about the new head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. But for now, for Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will be back with a scheduled brand new episode on Tuesday.